Hey, it's Simon here with the Caddis Fly Shop. Today I'm going to be tying March Brown Nymph for you guys. It's pretty fitting because it's starting to warm up here and it'll be a great nymph that'll fish well once those bugs start moving around. So here's what it looks like. It's a jigged March Brown Nymph with a mottled brown bead, and it's got, the legs are actually a Zonker material. I'm going to show you why I chose that. It looks pretty buggy in the water, kind of like the clinger nymphs. You can see when it gets wet it's not as puffy and it really is super buggy and adds a little bit of movement and just looks pretty close to the actual bug. So okay, so starting with this fly, I like to tie it on a Umpqua U660 in a size 12 is what I like to tie it on, and I use a Hareline mottled slotted bead in mottled brown. It's a tungsten bead. You can use another bead. I like to use, you can use a different color. I like to use this color because those colors kind of have a fat head, so it kind of looks like the body a little bit. The thread I'm using is this olive brown Thread-Danvilles 70 Denier thread. The way I tie this, you don't really see the thread that much, but if it peaks, I like to keep it close to the color of the body. Not super important, you could use brown or kind of anything, but this is the thread I like to use. So I like to start by just securing this bead so it gets out of my way. So I'll just take a bunch of wraps until this thing isn't moving all over the place. Which that should be a little bit better, just kind of to keep it out of your hair while you're doing stuff. So then we'll take thread wraps to the back of the shank like that. And then to start, to tie it in, I like to use a pheasant tail fiber for the tail. I do like to take about 3 or 4 fibers, something like that, just like a good bunch of them, and they kind of have longer tails, so I do like to give them a good sized tail, and these pheasant tail fibers work really good. So I'll kind of tie that in and give it some space, not right on the back, so I can kind of measure how big I want it, and I'm not going to crank down on the thread quite yet. And then I'll get it to the length I want it. Like, they have a good sized tail, so that's pretty good. So now once I measure that, I will crank it down and get the tail that I want. So now what I like to do is, this is scrap, you know, you're not going to use it, but I do like to make it work for me. So I'll take some wraps up to the head of the fly to help build the taper. I'll use this, what would be thrown out, I will use it kind of to my advantage just to build the body before I snip the excess and throw it. So I'll take a wrap back and then I'll go forward and up to the head, and then I will kind of come back about halfway and then forward once more, and then that just, you know, you can use the material to your advantage so you don't have to sit around here all day building a taper with just thread. So take some wraps over this just to kind of secure it, and if there's a very large bump in diameter, I'll kind of fill that in. But the thread I use for this is copper soft wire in medium, and so I'll take, you don't need that much, about that long, couple inches, maybe like 3-4 inches. You're probably not going to use it all, and you can snip it off or kind of tear it off. I have these junk scissors that I like to use, and I like to tie this in from the bottom of the bead on the bottom of the body, so it doesn't screw it, like make one side bigger than the other. Not super important, that's just the way I do it. I'll kind of take some wraps back up to the top to secure it, and then the dubbing I like to use for this is a mix of two. I like to use one of these Hares masks, and I like to use my dubbing rake with it, and I'll rake out some colors and stuff. The cool thing about these masks is this lighter stuff will give you lighter dubbing, this darker stuff will give you darker dubbing, so you can kind of pick what you want to use. So I like to pick out of a Hares mask like that, and then I will use squirrel hair dubbing in brown and kind of mix that together. So I'll take both colors like this and kind of pick it and pull it until it's kind of evenly mixed, and that will be our dubbing. So starting with the back, you want to create a slim taper towards the back, so create a very slim profile back here, and we'll just kind of slowly build the body up to the thorax with this stuff. Not a super crazy body, it's just a dubbed body, pretty simple. But I think it looks pretty good. It looks a lot like the bug when you find them in the water. And so we'll just kind of keep adding and slowly building up that profile as we work towards the end of the abdomen here, up to where the wing case is going to be. So kind of creating a tighter noodle, I think, helps, so you don't get these weird fat spots. I'd rather take my time with this part where you're building the taper, because if you don't, the fly can end up looking really weird on you. You'll have like a lump in the middle of the body, so I do like to take my time with this part. So kind of finish building that taper up, and then any excess you can just kind of fill in where the legs and the wing case are going to go. So then I will get this thread out of my way, and we will wrap the body in this soft wire. This is to give it that segmented look, but also just to make the fly more durable so your dubbing doesn't come all undone. Once you get to about here, I would just kind of wrap the rest and then do some wraps around it and either helicopter the rest off or just snip it. I have a junk pair of scissors that I use to cut wire. If you have a nice pair of scissors, I don't recommend cutting the wire with it. You'll kind of ruin them. I learned that the hard way. Okay, so now for the wing case, I use this cinnamon tip turkey feather. You can use pheasant tail if you want. I think this stuff is just easier to work with. It's a little softer, so I'll take a cut of it. You don't need a lot. You just need it to be wide enough for the wing case, really. And so take a piece like this. We don't really need the tip, so I'll cut that off because it's a little too narrow, but I'll take this piece for the wing case right here, and we'll kind of figure out where we want that wing case to end. I like to work my way back to right about here. You know, it's not a huge area, but that's where I like to work my way to. And then for the legs, we actually use these zonker strips, these pine squirrel zonkers right here, and we'll throw it in a dubbing loop. So to do that, if you've never created a dubbing loop before, you double it over like this into a loop. And you know, at first, just to make it easier, I'm going to add a little bit of extra dubbing on the thorax under where those legs are going to go in. Just again, this is so you don't have to, so you can kind of keep that tapered look. So I'll add just a tiny little bit more dubbing here so that wing case pops, and then now give yourself a good amount of thread right here, wrap over, and then you can see there's a space here. You don't want that when you make the dubbing loop. You need to close that off, so take a wrap around, cinch it off, work your way back up to the bead, and now you have your loop here. And if you have a bobbin rest, I would get this thing out of your way so it's not annoying you. And so now you have your loop here, right? And so we'll kind of leave that to the side right now. And the legs, I use these pine squirrel zonkers. I have one here, and some sort of material clamp makes it a lot easier. You can just kind of get it in there, but a clamp really makes it a lot easier. So what you're going to do is you're going to snip it off of the clamp right here. I like these zonkers because they just make it really easy to load a dubbing loop because it's kind of pre-cut into a size. And there's all this excess. You're going to want to trim a lot of that off. We're just going to use the tips of this stuff. Otherwise, the leg's are going to be way too long. So next, you got to use some sort of dubbing spinner. I think you can spin it with your finger. Again, this spinner just makes it easier. I use this Umpqua Dreamstream one, and then some of this dubbing wax helps the material stick inside of it. So I'll just kind of coat this right here. And next, what we want to do is put these legs in very carefully, get them in up there. And then once that's cinched, you kind of pull it off. And so these legs are still a little bit long, so we're gonna want to pull them back a little bit. We're just kind of using the tips here, and yeah, just like that. And then all this excess, if we can, we want to cut it off because it's gonna make it look really weird. We just want the tips of that in there, so as close as you can get to kind of cutting the rest of that you want to do. And then we'll spin this up really tight, and that'll give us that buggy look for the legs that we're going to wrap around. Tighter you spin it, the closer the fibers get. I like them pretty close because we're only taking like 2 or 3 wraps around. So then we'll do that, and as you go, I like to kind of pull them back as we wrap that around. And, yeah, kind of like this, and then we'll end up by the bead. Hang that down here, and it's going to look kind of weird and like puffed out the top, and that's why we have that wing case. That'll splay the legs out, take a couple wraps around that thread down there, and then we'll snip off this dubbing loop. And then if you have that wax, that's really useful because you can kind of push these legs down and out of the way, and then you'll pull this wing case over the top and cinch it off. Snip this wing case, and then you're pretty much done. You just got to whip finish. When I whip finish, I like to put a little bit of dubbing in just to hide the last thread. You don't need to do this, it's just the way I do it. Grab your whip finish tool. If you're doing it this way with the dubbing, you would take the wrap under here, do your wraps right here, pull it, cut, snip. This is optional, but it's what I like to do. I like to use some Solarez bone dry right here. This helps keep the knot good and coat the wing case just for kind of durability of the fly up here where you did all that work. And then you'll do some UV glue, and then you're pretty much done. That's a pretty buggy little March Brown imitation right here. You got these big legs up here, and that's my jigged March Brown impersonation. Give it a go if you want. Thanks.